With version 2.1, Miyabi is officially getting her first rerun alongside Yuzuha. For those unfamiliar, Miyabi is easily the strongest DPS in the game, and even among all DPS units, she's consistently at the top. Despite her dominance, some players are still unsure whether she's worth pulling for, especially with so many powerful units already in rotation. But for veteran players who are still on the fence, there's another point even for you to consider here. Mono ice teams have recently gained a lot of attention due to a special mechanic interaction, and it turns out that freeze effects actually prevent boss stun timers from ticking down, making Miyabi's teams incredibly strong in high difficulty content. In today's video, we'll be breaking down everything you need to know though about Miyabi, including things like how her kit functions, what kind of W engine she should run, how to build her, and the general playstyle and combos that have been updated that make her insane. As a reminder, content in this video is based on the creator beta server though, but if you learned something new or enjoyed today's content, be sure to like, comment, and subscribe. Without further ado though, let's break down everything new or old that you need to know about Miyabi. Despite being an anomaly agent, Miyabi is best played spending most of her time on field, focused on managing her core mechanic, aka Fallen Frost. Building this resource is fairly simple. Every time you apply Frostburn to an enemy, you gain 1 stack of Fallen Frost, and this can be done through her basic attacks, skills, and other Frostburn inflicting abilities. Once you reach max stacks, holding down her basic attack will trigger an enhanced basic attack that deals massive damage and consumes said resource, resulting in an absolutely insane burst. That's really the main goal of her gameplay though. Rotate through her skills to apply Frostburn, maintain and counter stacks, and then unleash her enhanced basic as soon as it's ready. With how quick and consistent this rotation is, Miyabi is one of the easiest to use and high DPS characters that Zenless has to offer, but there are mechanics and tricks to master if you want to fully unlock her damage. Let's start with her kit. Before diving into Miyabi's skills, it's again really important to understand her unique resource, also known as Fallen Frost. This is a major part of her kit and really what sets her apart from other DPS characters. Miyabi can hold up to 6 stacks of Fallen Frost at a time, and she starts with 3 when entering the field. You generate stacks primarily by inflicting Frostburn and by using some of her abilities, but as a quick aside, Frostburn is a powerful debuff in Miyabi's kit that increases the buildup rate of Frost anomalies, which is Miyabi's current unique to her anomaly. To trigger it, Miyabi first applies Ice Fire by dealing Frost damage, then when she applies Frostbite to an enemy with Ice Fire, it triggers Frostburn Break, dealing high Frost damage, which is scaled off of 1500% of her attack, and then puts the enemy into the Frostburn state. To add to this, when attacking enemies with Ice Fire, Miyabi gains bonus Frost anomaly buildup rate equal to her crit rate, capped at 80%. This is going to be very important for her build, by the way. In addition to this, when an enemy is in the Frostburn state, all allies build up anomaly faster, helping you apply things like burns, shocks, or even freezes quicker. Miyabi can't reapply Ice Fire during Frostburn though, and the effect ends when Frostbite runs out. To add to this though, it can also be removed early if another element is applied, but more important than anything that I just mentioned is that when she triggers Frostburn Break, Miyabi also gains 1 Fallen Frost point, which is very important, especially in her opening combo. Now, if her core passive and unique mechanic didn't sound long enough, her EX special and any disorders activated by the team will also grant 2 Fallen Frost points, and her ultimate will additionally grant 3 stacks by itself. Now, these stacks are only consumed again when using her enhanced basic attack, but this move uses 2 stacks per charged level with a max level of 3. This is the main damage ability that we'll be prioritizing though, and mastering the loop of building and spending these stacks is key to maximizing Miyabi's DPS, so all factors including Frostburn, Fallen Frost points, and even the exact number of points that she has is incredibly important to consider when playing her. For Miyabi's additional ability, if another character on your team is a support or from the same faction, Miyabi's enhanced basic attack deals 60% more damage. Additionally, when any teammate triggers disorder, Miyabi gains 2 Fallen Frost points, and her next enhanced basic will also ignore 30% of the enemy's ice resistance. Let's look at Miyabi's basic attacks. Her basic combo, Kazahana, chains up to 5 slashes, and the first 2 deal physical damage, while the last 3 deal frost. The 5th hit can block enemy attacks, giving her built-in survivability, and this is something that's often undervalued, but incredibly helpful in fights. The real value comes from her enhanced basic, Shimotsuki though. By holding the basic attack button while at least having 2 Fallen Frost stacks, Miyabi will start and enter into a charging stance. She consumes 2 stacks per charge level as earlier mentioned, with a total max level of 3, but once fully charged and released, she performs an extremely powerful slash that has an incredibly high damage multiplier. Miyabi's special attacks serve both as damage tools and resource generators, and her EX special specifically is a fast multi-hit dash that slashes enemies in her path. Using the skill will grant her 2 Fallen Frost stacks, and pressing the skill after the first cast will perform a second strike for additional damage and and 2 more stacks. Now these skills are essential to her Fallen Frost loop and should be used frequently, but as a reminder, overcapping on stacks is wasteful, and if you're not spending them efficiently with her enhanced basic, you'll lose out on a lot of damage potential. Miyabi's dodge skill is a fast, long-range dash that provides invulnerability and also allows her to avoid damage while repositioning. Her dodge counter is a quick frost strike that deals decent damage and applies anomaly, but while this isn't necessarily a major DPS contributor, the amount of comfort and added anomaly application from using this skill is significant, especially with how important it is to Miyabi surviving. Now let's talk about Miyabi's chain and ultimate. Her chain attack is a large area frost slash triggered during chain windows, and while it's great for applying damage across multiple enemies, the amount of anomaly that it applies is also pretty significant. Now that said, Miyabi is a character who oftentimes will perform manual chains or sometimes completely bypass using her chain attack entirely, but that's not to say she doesn't use her chain attack, it's just that certain compositions, especially Mono Ice Miyabi, doesn't tend to necessarily use her chain attack nearly as often. Now her ultimate is where her damage truly shines. Miyabi's ultimate is a sequence of slashes followed by a cinematic finisher, and this deals massive frost damage again across a wide area. Now on top of this damage, the ultimate will also grant 3 Fallen Frost points and also buff Miyabi's ice damage by 30% for 12 seconds, and as you'd imagine, it's normally very important to use her ultimate, then line up an additional cast of her enhanced basic attack so that she can deal as much damage as possible. Finally, in terms of her assist abilities, Miyabi doesn't often prefer to use her assist related skills, as either using a dodge counter or pairing attacks with her basic can leave her on field for longer. That said, she does have a defensive assist that can be used in certain fights for their mechanics, like with Typhon, but otherwise this is pretty standard as far as DPS go, and truthfully, Miyabi will be quick swapping or swapping off field quite often, and there aren't that many opportunities for her to perform assists anyways. Now let's talk about her skill priority. Her core passive and basic are equally as important, and as a result, they top the list in terms of importance. But following this, her EX and ultimate are also incredibly impactful. However, after this, her dodge and then her assist should be prioritized. Now to be clear, though there is an ordering to which skills should be upgraded, it's worth noting that every ability in Miyabi's kit is essential for maximizing her damage. The only real exception to this is Miyabi's assist related abilities, since she often prefers using dodge counters, parrying with her basic, or just isn't on field to use her assist anyways. Otherwise though, everything is pretty important. Now let's talk about Miyabi's combos and how she approaches combat. Before we dive into the actual combos though, it's important to understand how her abilities interact with her basic attack chain. Several of her skills allow her to skip or start at a different point in her 5-hit basic attack combo, and as a result, it's important to keep these in mind as they will affect your actual gameplay. To start, using her ultimate, the first parts of her enhanced basic attack or using her EX special will then allow her to begin her basic attacks starting from the 3rd attack in this sequence. If you use the 5th part of her basic attack, her non-EX special, or a dash attack, this will then allow you to skip straight to the 2nd part of her basic. Now finally, if you perform a dodge counter or a quick assist, Miyabi will then be able to start at the 4th part of her basic combo, and this skip is especially valuable as the 4th hit is one of the strongest and most versatile parts of said attack. It places her 1 step away from the 5th hit, which enables her to parry enemies' attacks, and overall the attack is just very comfortable, which makes it a very powerful offensive and defensive option that she has access to. Now that we've addressed the skips though, let's now talk about her combos and how to approach fights. When opening a battle with Miyabi, you'll want to take full advantage of her starting 3 stacks of Fallen Frost, and of course the goal here is to reach 6 stacks as frequently as possible so Miyabi can then activate her enhanced basic attack. With these extra 3 stacks at the start of a fight, your goal is simple: begin with her EX special, follow up with her basic that she skips to afterward, and by the end of the 5th hit, you'll typically trigger a frost anomaly, allowing Miyabi to then immediately fully charge Shimotsuki to deal a significant early burst. As a side note, if you aren't able to trigger an anomaly with this, using a few extra basic attacks will also work, as your goal again is just to activate a frost anomaly. Now when Miyabi isn't given the 3 free Fallen Frost points at the start of a fight, she instead has a more flexible but often team reliant set of combos / priorities. While not necessarily set in stone like her opening combo, Miyabi instead focuses on the following when missing the 3 free points. First, apply / trigger an anomaly effect against an enemy with one of Miyabi's allies, then use Miyabi's EX special to reach 2 total Fallen Frost points. Miyabi then has the option to either continue with another EX special immediately if she has the energy for it, or she can use her basics to then continue applying anomaly against an enemy, triggering a frost anomaly plus disorder proc, and then reaching 4 points. Regardless of the order, Miyabi's goal is to use 2 EX specials and apply a disorder with the help of her ally, and in doing so, she then reaches 6 points so that she can later use this for her enhanced basic attack. As a reminder, reminder, these combos can change based on the cooldown of Frostburn, but ultimately, overcapping or wasting a single point of Miyabi's EX special is not the end of the world, it's just something you'll have to account for. As for her ultimate, the best time to use it is during stun windows, where it benefits from an increased damage multiplier. However, it's also important to remember that it grants 3 Fallen Frost stacks in addition to dealing strong AoE damage. This can impact her combos if you're not careful, as overcapping on Frost points will waste potential value, and with this, you'll ideally want to use her ultimate when she has 0 up to 2 Fallen Frost stacks, bringing her then up to 5, and then by triggering a Frost anomaly, she'll gain the 6th and final stack, allowing her to finish with an enhanced basic for maximum DPS. Finally, I have 2 last tips for maximizing Miyabi's performance. First, it is very important to swap or switch off of Miyabi after fully charging her enhanced basic attack, and this is because her enhanced basic has a long animation. But if you swap to another character the moment that it's fully charged, you'll still perform the attack off field while you continue fighting with another swapped in agent. This quick swap in particular saves huge amounts of time and can significantly increase your overall DPS, so it's definitely worth learning and incorporating if possible. That said, as a reminder, Miyabi isn't able to actually apply her Frost Anomaly Disorder if she's not on field, so if you end up missing an anomaly because you swapped off of field, you'll need to be more conscious about this, otherwise, again, you'll miss out on damage. Now, it's also important to carefully consider who you're swapping to and from when using Miyabi, especially when running sets like Astra Voice or supports like Yuzuha. Unlike Astra, who doesn't require strict team ordering, supports like Sokaku, Seth, and Yuzuha do benefit from being placed in the correct order on the character select screen. This ensures that buffs like Sokaku's Fly the Flag do end up being given to Miyabi as opposed to someone like Yuzuha, and additionally, Yuzuha's quick assist behavior and her sweet scare mechanic also make her placement even more important. Using certain abilities will cause Yuzuha to quick assist into the next teammate, so her position determines which anomaly type she copies, which is even more crucial than you'd imagine. In my experience though, it's generally more effective to copy the anomaly type of your main DPS rather than someone like Vivian or Bernice. As such, optimizing team order and testing different setups can go a long way if your goal is to improve your overall damage output. When it comes to W engines for Miyabi, her signature remains the clear best in slot. It's built specifically for her playstyle, providing crit damage, a simple to trigger passive, and a long-lasting ice damage buff, but this single W engine can increase her total damage output by 20 to even 40% compared to other options, which is why you'll often hear players either recommending it or expressing frustration over needing to pull for it. By comparison, Fusion Compiler is a solid budget alternative, and this is because of its pen ratio, attack percent increase, and overall higher base attack as an S rank. But to be clear, she does still gain okay value from the added anomaly proficiency, but this isn't nearly the insane performance that you'd expect from Miyabi, as this still at best accounts for a 22 to 25% damage increase compared to her signature. Next, we have Electro Lip Gloss, which is surprisingly competitive, but is more dependent on having extra copies. This is an issue, of course, as battle passes are definitely rarer and more difficult to gain max copies of, and this is also a result of the months in between each battle pass release. In terms of its stats, having the raw anomaly proficiency as a main stat isn't ideal compared to something like attack percent or even crit rate, but the passive's added attack does help compensate for this. However, the catch here is that you do need to trigger an anomaly first to get said bonus, which can be tricky in fast-paced encounters where there's little time to build this up. This is exactly why the performance gap between Miyabi's signature and her free-to-play alternatives is so significant though. Lastly, let's now talk about S-rank W engines with crit rate as a main stat like Steel Cushion. These performed reasonably well too compared to other free options. However, as expected, it functions mainly as a stat stick and resulted in a noticeable 30 to 32% drop in performance compared to, again, Miyabi's signature. Now, in terms of overall results, her signature remains the clear best in slot, and Fusion Compiler comes in second with around a 72 to 80% effectiveness, offering decent performance with some trade-offs. Electro Lip Gloss at S5 trails slightly behind, with it sitting around 70 to 75% efficiency, which is respectable, but as a side note, this W engine is less consistent due to the nature of its passive. Meanwhile, other options like Weeping Gemini or Rainforest Gourmet fall even further behind, often relying on RNG and lacking the consistent power or buffing that Miyabi desires. Let's talk now about Miyabi's disk drives. Her best disk drive setup is straightforward, with Branch and Bladesong being her top performing 4-piece set by far. With this set, if the equipper's anomaly mastery is 115 or higher, they gain an additional 30% crit damage. This is easy to maintain for Miyabi specifically, as she was designed and provided this amount of anomaly mastery straight away from her base stats. In addition to this, when any squad member applies his freeze or triggers shatter while the set is equipped, the wearer gains 12 crit rate for 15 seconds. Together, these effects provide a strong amount of free stat while also being fairly easy to maintain uptime wise. As a result, it's clear why this set ended up being the highest performing. That said, while it doesn't offer too many anomaly specific boosts, an alternative like Polar Metal still only ends up performing around 3 to 5% worse than Branch and Blade Song. The 4-piece set bonus here increases basic and dash attack damage by 20%, but this bonus ramps up to 40% total for 12 seconds if any squad member inflicts freeze or shatter. This of course makes it especially powerful in freeze-based comps, and this will allow consistent uptime on the full damage boost. Now again, while it doesn't offer any anomaly specific bonuses, Polar Metal excels in burst focused or freeze reliant ice teams, providing strong value for characters like Miyabi or Ellen when used in mono ice based teams. On the other hand, 4-piece Woodpecker Electro remains another viable option, though it is still weaker than Branch and Blade Song as well. Now admittedly, the 8% crit rate and 9% attack from landing crit does increase Miyabi's basic, EX, and ultimate damage, but the set still underperforms overall, and with this in terms of raw stats and value, its performance ends up being 5% weaker compared to other, more optimized sets for her. Now when it comes to 2-piece sets, Woodpecker Electro actually stands out as the best choice thanks to the free 8% crit rate, and as Miyabi ideally aims to make use of her core passive, she'll ideally look to reach at least 80% crit rate, as this will convert directly to an increase in her Frost Anomaly buildup rate. Now if crit rate is accounted for, however, Astral Voice and Hormone Punk are also strong alternatives, but overall any set that will give you DPS will be fine. What's really most important is honestly how many rolls you have on said piece. Now for main stats, the goal is to aim for crit rate / attack percent in slot 4, ice damage, pen ratio or attack percent in slot 5, and anomaly mastery or attack percent in slot 6. Now as you've probably noticed since her release, Miyabi can sometimes swap out her main stats depending on the team. For example, when paired with characters like Vivian, she benefits more from using anomaly mastery in the 6th slot since it helps her trigger Vivian's mechanics more often. Similarly, her 5th slot can vary based on the support that she brings. Damage percent isn't always the best choice, and in some cases, pen ratio or even attack percent can outperform it if she's already stacked too much damage percent from other sources. With this, here's now a sample stat line and some recommendations for what to use on your Miyabi. Ideally, you're looking for 3000 attack, 80 crit rate, and 120 crit damage, and when building Miyabi, there's some important context to keep in mind. First, the recommended 80% crit rate isn't a strict cap, it's just the minimum you'd want to reach while avoiding going all the way to 100%, which would again waste potential value. Effects like the 4-piece bonus from Branch and Blade also contribute to this total, so be sure to factor these in. But as for balancing attack and crit damage, Miyabi's kit, allies, and even her W engine and disk drives already provide a significant amount of damage percent, totaling in the near 100 plus amount. Because of this, attack percent mains on the 4th slot tend to perform more consistently than crit damage mains, but that said, aiming for disk drive pieces with more total stat rolls again is still the priority. Just keep these in mind when optimizing her final build. Now let's break down Miyabi's Mindscapes. Miyabi's first Mindscape is one of her most impactful early upgrades, and that's because every point of Fallen Frost consumed during her enhanced basic will now ignore 6% enemy defense up to 36 ignore at max charge. Now this does significantly increase the damage of her enhanced basic, especially against high defense bosses, but more importantly, if her max charge slash hits an enemy under Frostburn, it will then remove Frostburn and immediately grant 20% anomaly buildup rate to the entire squad for 10 seconds. Now this not only makes it a personal damage spike, but also a team-wide anomaly tool, enabling faster stunners and helping DPSs from other anomaly characters like Vivian or Grace. To add to this, the immediate removal of the Frostburn state also means that Miyabi can gain Fallen Frost points faster as well, and all of this is decently impactful depending on the situation. Overall though, this Mindscape provides a 12% damage boost to Miyabi and is pretty significant. Now following this, her second Mindscape provides a huge consistency and utility spike, and first, it increases the damage of her basic and dodge counter by 30%, and obviously both are very important in building up Frostburn and pushing damage while generating Fallen Frost points. More importantly though, she now also gains 1 Fallen Frost stack when landing the 5th hit of her basic attack combo, helping generate more enhanced basic attack bursts faster. This alongside an immediate 6 Fallen Frost stacks and 15% crit rate also means that she can instantly open with a max charge enhanced basic while staying primarily on field as a main DPS. With this however, Miyabi does gain anywhere between 25 and 34% worth of value to her total DPS, assuming that you've activated the Mindscape. Miyabi's 4th Mindscape is decent but not nearly as game breaking as the others, and that's because the break damage increase from said Mindscape is decent but not insane. By contrast, although the 250 decibels may not seem super insane for her, having 250 decibels each time that she uses Frostburn does start to add up and will contribute positively towards her ultimate casts. Miyabi's 6th and final Mindscape is an insane buff to her kit that really defines how she functions in combat, and upon entering Shimotsuki stance, she gains a buff called Polar, which increases its damage by 30%. More importantly though, every time she consumes a stack of Fallen Frost, she will then automatically unleash a slash based on her current charge level, which is way more insane than you think it sounds, as it will perform a level 1, level 2, and level 3 slash if she ends up charging and holding up to the max amount. These auto slashes also don't interrupt the charging process, and this allows you to fully charge while she deals extra damage in the background. As a result, this does dramatically increase your DPS ceiling while also smoothing out gameplay, as well, everything is dead by the time you've done this. Jokes aside though, the Mindscapes feel unbelievable in terms of overall DPS, and as for her final Mindscape, it's no surprise that this Mindscape specifically offers her the highest increase of all though, effectively granting her anywhere between a 36 and 60% damage increase compared to her 5th Mindscape. Now, the recent spotlight on Yuzuha has also grown some interest in Miyabi's team options and whether her best in slot teams have changed. While traditional setups like Miyabi, Lycon, Sokaku are still top tier, teams built around Yuzuha and Miyabi are quickly becoming strong alternatives. Yuzuha's ability to copy her teammates' anomaly also allows her to sync perfectly with Miyabi's gameplay, and this results in quicker Fallen Frost points, stronger anomaly application, and even more frequent disorder triggers. Now, while Yuzuha isn't necessarily a must pull for Miyabi, pairing her with an anomaly focused agent like Yanagi or Vivian does make her buffs incredible, and with this, she's not just a flexible support for any anomaly team, she's one of the best supports in Miyabi-centric lineups as a whole. As an interesting side note though, with Yuzuha's Mindscapes unlocked, particularly her 1st or 2nd, Yuzuha can enable teams to defeat Deadly Assault bosses or reach at least 60,000 performance points within just 2 stun windows. However, since endgame rewards cap out once you reach either 20,000 score or clear within 5 minutes, this level of performance and optimization can oftentimes feel more like a luxury than a necessity, making it impressive but not necessarily impactful in reality. That said, even with Yuzuha's impressive performance potential, the mono ice team of Miyabi, Lycon, and Sokaku still won out in terms of consistency and overall team cost. Now, not only can this trio achieve the same high level clear benchmarks, it also does so with fewer limited or S rank agents, making it more accessible and more reliable for players looking to tackle endgame content. With this all out of the way though, here were the top performing Miyabi focused teams from my recent testing. Now, in order, it goes Sokaku, Miyabi, Lycon. In 2nd, it's Yuzuha, Vivian, Miyabi. In 3rd, Yuzuha, Yanagi, Miyabi. 4th, Astra, Vivian, Miyabi. And 5th, Astra, Yanagi, Miyabi. Now, it may come as a surprise to see Miyabi, Lycon, and Sokaku at the top of this list, but the team's sheer efficiency in terms of performance and cost makes it clear why it's ranked so highly. With constant freezing, stuns, and consistent DPS, the team excels in nearly every single type of content. Now, while it does require a higher level of mechanical execution, it's arguably the strongest team in Zenless right now. Its ability to clear bosses quickly, earn top tier scores, and do so with only 1 standard S rank and 1 A rank makes it incredibly powerful and very accessible for most players, assuming that they're willing to learn it though. Now, Yuzuha, Vivian, Miyabi was also a very powerful and impressive lineup, but while it did feel difficult or near impossible to kill bosses with just the limited agents and a single copy of their signature, these teams were some of the easiest to play and also performed amazingly. This was the case for both Yanagi and Vivian, and that's mostly because of how impactful Yuzuha ended up being for the team as a whole and not just for Miyabi. Now let's address the potential of 2 team variations that may seem a bit controversial following Yuzuha's release. With the original triple ice lineup of Miyabi, Sokaku, and Lycon continuing to dominate with its raw freeze and burst potential, testing has revealed some interesting results. Replacing either Sokaku or Lycon with Yuzuha still allowed the Miyabi-led team to perform on par with, or in some cases even better than, Miyabi paired with a 2nd anomaly agent. Now that said, there are a few things to consider though. First, while these Yuzuha-based ice teams can be effective, they still currently underperform when compared to the original mono ice setup in most scenarios. On top of this, they still maintain the same learning curve and mechanical demand as the traditional team. However, depending on the specific Deadly Assault buffs, Lycon may lose some of his value, opening the possibility for Yuzuha to match or outperform him in certain fights. In these cases, replacing Lycon with Yuzuha could be a viable and even optimal choice. Finally, as you've also probably noticed, Astra now has real competition for the spot of best support from Miyabi. However, this largely depends on who you pair Miyabi with. In lineups without a 2nd anomaly agent, Astra tends to perform more consistently and reliably, especially when used alongside a dedicated stunner or another support. That said, the moment an anomaly agent joins the team, Astra's value drops significantly. Even if Miyabi doesn't capitalize on all of Yuzuha's buffs, Yuzuha still synergizes and buffs Miyabi / the other anomaly agents better in these these compositions, and this has caused Astra to fall off quickly in terms of effectiveness. Now, despite all this, it is worth mentioning that the current set of Deadly Assault bosses do also favor and have more anomaly focused buffs, and as a result, Yuzuha certainly does benefit from this effect more than Astra. And with this, to say that Yuzuha is definitely better or worse than Astra is difficult to argue for. It really depends on the buffs or the fight. Finally, let's talk about whether Miyabi is worth pulling for. To do so though, I've included a pros and cons list of everything Miyabi. For her pros, Miyabi is easily the best DPS in the game, and this is because of her consistency, high damage, and ability to pair amazingly with all sorts of agents, including anomaly based, double support based, or even stun based lineups. In addition to this, in terms of mechanics and how she dominates the DPS list, Freeze is incredibly strong and near overpowered in terms of the ice anomaly category since it pauses stun timers. Moving from this, she also is one of the easiest DPSs to play once you learn her, as her combos and gameplay mechanics are pretty straightforward with clear indicators for when you're playing her right or wrong, which is unfortunately not something that you could actually say for some of the other characters in this game. Finally, her core mechanic is something that almost everyone in the game can interact with or contribute to, since helping Miyabi by either applying anomalies or stunning enemies quickly will significantly affect Miyabi's overall DPS. For Miyabi's cons, some bosses aren't able to be frozen, and therefore you aren't able to use one of the most OP mechanics in the game. To add to this, one of the newly released and recurring bosses in Deadly Assault is resistant both to frost damage and also immune to freeze, and is likely going to show up often as they are physical and one of the bosses that will definitely be catered towards Yuzuha. Now, to be clear, this design choice of trying to hurt or lessen the strength of Miyabi seems intentional, and with Hoyoverse's goal to seemingly prevent players from relying on Miyabi too much, this design choice seems intentional, and it appears they just don't want players playing Miyabi in every single team. Now, as a second major con, without her signature W engine, Miyabi's damage does take a noticeable hit, but she does still remain one of the strongest DPS in the game by a wide margin, and is definitely still powerful even if you're missing it. So if you're still on the fence about pulling from Miyabi, there's definitely a lot to consider here. We're in patch 2.1, and with future DPS units like Alice on the horizon, it's natural to be cautious. However, considering that we've already had 3 limited ice agents, Hugo, Ellen, and now a rerun of Miyabi, it seems unlikely that ZenlessZoneZero will introduce another ice DPS anytime soon. And even if one does arrive, it is pretty doubtful that they'll match or power creep Miyabi's combination of raw strength, flexibility, and ease of play, making her a very safe and worthwhile investment for ice focused teams currently. And I'm sure you guys could tell just by seeing her, she's definitely worth it. She's incredibly strong. Thanks again for watching though, guys. That's going to be it for today's video. As always, if you enjoyed, make sure to like, comment, and subscribe. Thanks again for your support. I'll see you guys on the next one though. Stay safe, stay healthy. Good night.